Continuing our discussion regarding the statement of the problem and how to write the statement of the problem, we will now have the sixth guideline. Okay, so in order for us to discuss the sixth guideline, let us try to answer this question. Where should we base the specific objectives? Okay, so from the, let's say, keyword itself, where should we base our specific objectives? It means that we are looking for the basis on how to write the specific objectives. So let's try to take a look with this example. Okay, so we have here the research topic. Our research topic revolves around ethanol. Okay, and according to McConnell 2016, one way for us to measure how effective an ethanol is to test and measure its flammability. Okay, so we have here flammability as one of our measurable variables. Next, you also found out, okay, in existing literature of Jackson of 2009, another way for us to determine the effectiveness of an ethanol product is to measure its volatility. So volatility, how quick it can evaporate. Okay, so we have volatility and flammability as our measurable variables. And these measurable variables class shall appear in your specific objectives. Okay, as you can see, we have here to compare the effectiveness of mabolo fruit as an alternative source of ethanol to the control groups in terms of flammability and volatility. Okay, it appeared in your specific objectives. Therefore, class, from this example, okay, can you infer where we based our measurable variables from our specific objectives? Okay, so where should we base our specific objectives? Our specific objectives shall be based on our review of related literature and studies. Therefore, that is our sixth guideline. Our specific objectives must be based from our RRL. Okay? So that is our sixth guideline. And take note, class, okay, take note that our RRLS here shall relate to our research topic. Okay? So such variables shall be obtained through the use of RRLS related to our research topic. Okay? And that will bring us to our next guideline. So let's try to, let's say, test our ethanol in terms of its flammability. Okay, so earlier we indicated that flammability is one of the measurable variables to test ethanol, the effectiveness of ethanol. And you found out that a certain ethanol product can last up to, or let's say, can burst in flames up to 60 seconds. Okay, then afterwards we tried to measure its volatility. Okay, and results showed that the material or the ethanol evaporated after 35 seconds. So class, we have here numbers, okay? And numbers pertain to quantities. Therefore, class, if we have quantities, can we say that the variables are measurable or not? Okay, so class, meaning to say, okay, our variables present here, flammability and volatility, it means that they are measurable variables. Therefore, class, our specific objectives shall present our measurable variables. Okay, the variables present in our specific objectives shall be measurable. Okay, take note, class, that measurable variables, they are quantitative variables. We can quantify such variables. We can produce such numbers. Okay, we can produce numbers from such variables. That is what we mean by quantitative. Okay, and quantitative variables can either be discrete or continuous. Okay, so these are the two, let's say, classifications of quantitative variables, discrete and continuous. So what is the difference between the two? Okay, what is the difference between discrete quantitative variables and continuous quantitative variables? Okay, so discrete quantitative variables are those variables that can be obtained through the process of counting. Okay, so for example, you are asked, how many balls are there in the field? So the question, how many, pertains to a quantity. Okay, it pertains to a quantity that can be easily obtained through the method of counting. So the data of the discrete quantitative variables are those numbers or data that can be obtained by means of counting. Okay, and it can be easily obtained with the use of our hands and fingers because we are just counting the let's say the variables. On the other hand, class, okay, continuous quantitative variables are those variables whose numbers or data can be obtained by means of measuring. And oftentimes, class, measuring, okay, the method of measuring requires certain tools, gadgets, and instruments. So for instance, in order for you to measure your height, you will need a ruler or a meter stick. Okay? In order for you to measure temperature, you will need a thermometer. In order for you to measure your mass or your weight, you will need a weighing scale. In order for you to measure time, you will need a stopwatch. And in order for you to measure volt, you can use the voltmeter. Okay? So meaning to say, continuous variables are variables whose numbers are obtained by means of using such instruments through the process of measuring. Unlike discrete, we only use our fingers so that we can count such variables. Okay, so that is the difference between discrete and continuous variables. Discrete if the number is obtained by counting, and continuous if the number is obtained by measuring. And remember, class, that the variables present in the specific objectives can either be discrete or continuous as long as it is a measurable variable. Okay? And just like we mentioned earlier, okay, over and over again, the measurable variables must appear in your specific objectives. Okay, the specific objectives must include all the measurable variables, and that will serve as our eighth guideline. Okay, so next, okay, last but not the least, your objectives, okay, specifically the specific objectives, it must be guided by the acronym SMART. Okay, and what do we mean by SMART? Okay, SMART means specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time bound. So, meaning to say, class, your goals, okay, your objectives must be specific, must be measurable, must be attainable, must be realistic, and must be time bound. How can you say that your objective is specific? Okay, your objective is a specific objective if it avoids broad concepts. Okay, so you must be specific in choosing your objective so that you can attain focus of the study. Okay, so that it can centralize to your direction. Okay, next, your objectives is measurable. Okay, your objectives are measurable if you have variables that are quantified. Okay, your objectives are measurable if you have variables that are quantified, or meaning to say you have variables that can be measurable. Okay, you can assign specific numbers to such variables. Next, your specific, or let's say your objectives are considered to be attainable if it is within the researcher's mental skill, capacity, and level. So remember, class, in our first lesson, we said that your research topic must be within the level of cognition of the researcher. It must be within the level of the researcher's skill and mental capacity. Okay? Next, the objectives are said to be realistic if they are feasible. Okay? The objectives are, let's say, realistic if they exist. Okay? Let's say if you can really attain such objective. It must be feasible. It can be done. Okay? So you do not choose objectives that cannot be performed or cannot be attained. And last but not the least, your objectives are said to be time bound if it fits your time frame, if it can be achieved in a specific period of time. Okay? You do not set objectives that cannot be obtained in a specific period of time. Remember, class, your SIPs have their own deadline. Okay? So if you chose objectives that cannot be attained within that specific deadline, meaning to say your SIP or your research alone cannot be done easily. Okay? So you must be guided by this acronym so that you can choose objectives that fit to your criteria. Okay? And that will be our discussion regarding the different guidelines on how you can write the statement of the problem. Okay? So for our next video presentation, we will now discuss further the specific objectives. So we have two classifications of the research questions when it comes to the specific objectives, and that will be the main concern of our next video presentation.